Hey, it's ENDYMION, and the Obsidian Avowed dilemma situation that is forming around Obsidian has gotten much worse as whistleblowers have now come forward. And even David Jaffe, the creator of God of War, has now decided to defend Matt Hansen, the art director of Avowed, and claims that Dragon Age Veilguard failed because of YouTubers. This is all starting to mutate like Cell in Dragon Ball Z. First we thought this wasn't that bad, sure it's annoying, but it'll pass. Then the situation swallowed an android. And we went, well, that's not good, and I'd say we're currently in the mid-form of Cell in terms of uh-ohs right now. Not quite perfect Cell just yet, but we're getting there, fellas. Let's start with Jaffe, because this guy is losing his composure quite often these days, so what happened? Well, David Jaffe, like I said, made God of War. He was involved with the original 2 games, then went off and made some other stuff, and now he mostly just complains online via YouTube about people like me and others. Jaffe is a stalwart defender of the agenda as well. After all, he has a trans child and openly claims he has many family members that identify as LGBTQ. While I mean, whatever you say, Jaffe, that's your life, but just cause you live one way, it doesn't mean that everyone needs to agree with you 100%. Anyway, he released a video recently where he decided to tackle concepts like Avowed's art director pushing pronouns nonsense as well as the YouTubers grifting thing. So let's break this down one thing at a time. Firstly, we'll talk the Avowed thing, so here's what Jaffe said.
They're making the game really woke to upset Elon and Grums. Well, I don't know. I mean, I know what you're talking about, Eddie. I know the art director was basically pushing back because Elon got upset and Grums got upset that there are, God forbid, pronouns in that you can select or maybe not even select in Avowed. And so the art director got pissed off and the community manager shut her account down. But I don't know, the game's almost done. So I don't really, that may have just been sort of a pissy kind of statement. But I mean, again, it's, and I agree, Morgan, when you say, oh my God, again with this. I know, but this is the news of the day. This is sort of what happens in the gaming world right now. We're still talking games. I'm still playing lots of games. We're still doing game design discussions, but these are the people that, are influencing something. Don't know why, but they are. I mean, imagine how unsuccessful you have to be that you're willing to go, you know what I'll do then? My game wasn't working out. So you know what I'll do? I'll build a whole career about bitching about stuff that I find woke. Really? God, that must suck for you. I'm not trying to be like reverse psychology the guy. I'm just saying it's like, Jesus, man, just go make some shit if you don't like it. There's a lot to like out there.
I think Jaffe is missing the point, which will become a reoccurring theme here when I talk more about him. But I think the guy just assumed that everyone would be on board with the same things that he deals with apparently in his daily life. Well, like I said, everyone is different. Not everyone has the same life or things around them, so of course that wouldn't be the case. I think that Jaffe is just culturally out of the loop as to what players want these days. Look, respect where it's earned, the guy made God of War, that can never be taken away from him. But I think he needs to realize that video games as a culture have grown and changed since when he was still making them. The fact of the matter is that what Avowed's art director is doing here is nonsense. Pushing for pronouns is redundant when it's especially a separate choice from your gender. Like I said in a previous video, gender and pronouns should be synonymous with one another. If you're a man, you're he, him, a woman, she, her. It used to be so simple. And I think the more we give into delusion, the worse everything becomes. The world is hard enough. There's already problems galore that need attention, and now we gotta deal with these emotionally stunted adults who crave to differentiate themselves from others so that they can feel special. And at first it was, okay, fine, have your pronouns, it doesn't affect me. Then it became, if you don't address me how I see myself, you will now get fired, blacklisted, or worse. This draws a line where your personal beliefs now have philosophical and economic harm on the well-beings of others. That, in my opinion, is not okay. And placing these things in games like Avowed, which by the way reminds you every time you open the menu what your pronouns are, and if you don't believe me, there's your pronouns listed beside your origin and level so that you can never escape it as you can see here on screen. I think Jaffe is a part of that group of people when I say that they no longer speak for players. I feel the same way for dying channels like Kinda Funny as well. These people who allowed the industry to morph and mutate into a Frankensteinian version of itself, but didn't have the backbones to push back because they were afraid of losing their access. So they instead championed these insane concepts because they believed as long as they agreed 99% with whatever was being considered the normal, the sponsors would remain and the free game codes would keep coming. And it's because of these spineless individuals that we are where we are right now. And like I said, and I believe this with my whole being, a lot of these people, whether it's David Jaffe, Kinda Funny, pretty much every single major gaming website, and even some YouTubers who try to act like they're holier than thou like the Act Man, these people, they don't speak for me anymore. Because if the industry was left to these people, we would be swimming in pronouns, body types 1, 2 through 6, and all kinds of delusional nonsense aplenty right now. Concord would likely still be alive if I or others didn't tell you what that game was about. Or the gaming community didn't have organized voices that were actually trying to tell the industry what we didn't want from them. So of course Jaffe would defend Avowed's Matt Hansen because Jaffe is a yes man. He's not going to go to war with the industry in the name of players because he still has one foot in that industry, whether he wants to admit it or not. Like when Matt Hansen, this art director on Avowed, retweeted the Elon Musk thing saying that pronouns were stupid, a mutual of Matt Hansen's on Blue Sky would then say this: "Love this. I propose we all just start adding pronoun options to all our games just to annoy these guys. Game as a character selector, flight simulator, abstract puzzle game, pronoun options." Matt Hansen would then reply, "I will petition for this on every game I make. It's about them thinking that they're pissing off the right people in their eyes, but in reality they don't realize by saying these things they're rejecting the overwhelming majority of their player bases with choices like this." I should also remind people that individuals like Matt Hansen have become very comfortable with their own racism as well. Remember that Hansen confirmed that he would overlook white applicants for black applicants solely because he wanted to replace what he called crusty white dudes in the game industry. And like I said in my previous video, Elon Musk caught wind of this. He actually had more to say when Ian Miles Chung, I probably pronounced that wrong, retweeted this and said, "Avowed art director at Obsidian and Microsoft brags about being racist and sexist against white guys. It's in the company's unspoken hiring policy where he's partly in charge of." Elon would then reply, "He is confessing to illegal behavior, won't end well for him." And we know that once Elon Musk signal boosted multiple tweets about Matt Hansen rejecting white applicants for black ones, it caught the attention of Chris Avellone, who actually co-founded Obsidian Entertainment, which of course is where Matt Hansen currently works. Avellone had been attacked in the past by allegations which were proven false, and then he won millions of dollars in damages. He came out publicly and stated that Matt Hansen could be legally sued into oblivion over his comments as well. Another user would then ask Chris Avellone, "Does being rejected automatically make it discrimination?" Avellone would reply, "No, but based on recent events, there's a case to be made even if the rejection may have been valid. That validity needs to be examined by the courts because of the recent announcements, and Obsidian would need to show proof of the validity of the rejection." So pretty much if applicants were to come forward and sue Obsidian for rejecting their applications because of their skin color, all of these applicants' rejection letters and proof of having applied to Obsidian would have to, for legal reasons of course, be kept on file. Which then puts Matt Hansen of Obsidian into a really bad spot, because then if and when he gets sued, those legal documents would have to be given by Obsidian to the court so they could oversee it and ensure that said rejections by Matt Hansen of these applicants was not due to race. And then of course, whoever did get hired would have their applications reviewed, especially if they were hired close to when these white applicants were allegedly overlooked. And then if that checks out, spaghetti-o for Matt Hansen pretty much. And I'm sure some may ask, well, couldn't Obsidian just lie or erase the documents? Couldn't they just change what those documents say? Well, if they did any of that, it would cause them a bigger problem, and if they got caught tampering evidence to falsify a narrative, they would be cooked. Remember how I said earlier, right now we're at the second form for sell? If Obsidian got caught tampering legal documents, yeah, that would be enough to turn this situation into a perfect Cell level event for this entire thing. Pretty much when it comes down to this, either Avowed's director gets cooked for overlooking white applicants, or Obsidian tampers documents to protect Matt Hansen, which then makes everything 100 times worse. The best case scenario for Matt Hansen right now is that he prays those applicants don't come forward to sue him. And if they do come forward, there will pretty much be no legal way that Hansen comes out of this unscathed. Circling back to David Jaffe, his protection of Avowed's Matt Hansen doesn't surprise me because again, the guy believes in the same sorts of things that Hansen does too. But also, Jaffe believes that the state of gaming, the culture if you will, how things are going are because of YouTubers like me and others. Here's more of what Jaffe had to say about how YouTube culture has apparently ruined games, specifically claiming that Veilguard failed because of us and more. Please watch.
You say that the gaming community ruined this game's success. I mean, you know, I don't think that's entirely fair, but I think there is a lot of truth to it. If you're EA, you've got to kind of prepare for the market winds that you're sailing into and all that. And so they should have been prepared to counter, and they weren't. Really, at this point, all that gaming community that you're talking about has done is they've made it so they've actually made games worse, which is what they say they're trying to not do. Because they have the charismatic grifters that make the videos that for whatever reason people respond to. People who haven't actually played this game will hate it just because they're sort of told to hate it. And so what does EA do next time? They don't make Stellar Blade. They just continue to sort of, you know, vanilla the out of everything they work on and make sure that no one's going to have anything to complain about. They straight up ask you if you want transgender game options 1 hour in. You select yes or no. So all the people bitching invited it into their game. I don't even know what it asks, but this character apparently is the Barv trans character. And so far there's nothing, not that needs to be, I mean, to me, that's the equivalent of saying, do you want black people? Do you want black people in your game? We have a button that'll get the blacks out. That's the equivalent of it. But if that's what you're saying, I mean, I didn't even know that's what they were asking. The only thing I've come across so far, and again, I've seen that cutscene, it's terribly written and performed, the Barv thing, but the only thing I've even come across so far is when you're talking to characters and one of your multiple options is you can romance a character who is the same sex as your character. And you can just be like, oh, no thanks. You're like Chad in SNL. It's like, no thanks.
I like how Jaffe goes unmasked here and says that being transgender is somehow connected to being a black person now. Wow, Jaffe, that is one hell of a statement that makes no sense, but alright then. Nobody is claiming that they don't want black people in games. But you don't find it weird that Veilguard has trans people in every single position of power within that game? And yet not a single villain in the game is trans or non-binary either. They are only represented as heroes who are just amazing and above everyone else. For God's sakes, when you have to choose between who should lead the Shadow Dragons and who should shepherd the future of Minrathous, which is the city at the middle of Tevinter's seat of power and also is very, very important since it's the place that you go to at the beginning and end of Veilguard's story, your two options are Dorian, a gay man, and the other mage whose name is Mayveris, who is a magister, and is also, by the way, a trans woman. Here's the thing, right? Tevinter has been documented before to be a place that holds magic above all. They literally have rules in place within their society to breed mages of differing houses together to make offsprings that become stronger when it comes to wielding magic. Dorian's entire questline is about this in Inquisition, by the way, yet BioWare, which of course Jaffe doesn't say this, because he doesn't know anything about what he's talking about, gives you the choice to make Tevinter be led by either a gay man or a trans woman. Two people who would vehemently be against the clan-like mating culture of Tevinter to make stronger mages. There's no way a society that openly embraces blood magic and slavery and mating rituals would want someone in power who opposes these creeds like Veilguard pushes onto you. Yet you also don't see the blood magic or the slavery in the streets of Minrathous while playing either. Because these activists, who Jaffe clearly agrees with and supports, have stripped all the nuance and uniqueness from these worlds to implement their own agenda and talking points. So gone are the gritty dark fantasy worlds, the rules that would never be rejected within Tevinter since it was there at its founding would never accept someone who rejects these beliefs to lead them in the first place. The point I'm making here is, like I said earlier, these people don't speak for me anymore. Because these things cannot be left in the hands or care of people like Jaffe and others because they have no backbones. Complaining that Veilguard failed because of me or others when current BioWare so obviously ruined their own world and lore, to virtue signal and inject as many non-binary and trans characters in positions of power within that game's world is astounding to me. And of course, Jaffe will never tell you this. He will gloss right over it, his fat thumbs pressing a button to skip, hoping that his audiences won't notice. Never mind Jaffe not being a voice of reason for gaming, the guy can't even get his own story straight for a single game in this either. So why would I listen to a guy who thinks that I'm responsible for killing Veilguard when he openly admitted before that he never even played Origins or 2?
And even the people that were writing me and saying, well, Jaffe doesn't know how different this is from the last Dragon Age. If you actually watch the video, I address that. I say in that video that I played Inquisition. I loved Inquisition. And clearly this doesn't feel like a direct sequel or even a continuation in some ways. The narrative is the same. It's about a lot of the same characters, and I didn't play the first two.
The guy is unfit to be listened to. So when it comes to the defense of, say, Avowed and Matt Hansen with him, why would I give Jaffe the leeway to give me a constructive opinion on either of these things? Knowing that every time he opens his mouth, it contradicts and forms to whatever will keep him in the good graces of the industry at large. Veilguard was not killed by YouTubers. BioWare destroyed it themselves. The same way with Avowed with the pronouns and oh my god, they even got the Killmonger overused haircut unironically being used in Avowed too. Like, look at this. Great. Because modern game developers, they just love that haircut, as we all know already. The pattern recognition is off the charts when it comes to Avowed, the same way it did with Veilguard. I guarantee you, once the game comes out, we're going to find stuff in there that people are going to point at and go, what the hell is this now? It's only a matter of time. And the only reason why Hansen or Jaffe are mad about any of this is simply because they got caught in the act. They can defend this stuff all they want, it's their right to do so, but it's also our right to reject it and speak on it candidly, because we all know if we don't, who will? I think what these sorts of types are most mad about is that the community in 2024 has finally found their voice in this conversation. The gaming community no longer feels misguided or ill-equipped to speak on topics because there's finally calculated groups in place for this sort of thing. Now when something happens, there's people who can talk about it, who have the resources, connections, and more to actually show you what's going on. We know that the legacy media is mad because their lies can no longer carry them to the finish line because we will find it. We will fact check them, and there are thousands of people out there who will show actual examples to the contrary. Their lies and agenda pushing can no longer go without notice, and that's what annoys them the most. Even Smash JT, a fellow YouTuber, had a whistleblower speak to him about Obsidian and Matt Hansen. To paraphrase Smash, he spoke to someone who used to work at Obsidian that had direct ties to Matt Hansen himself. This article comes from Fandom Pulse, which collected Smash's words. At one point, Smash says that Obsidian has, according to the leaker, devolved into a corporate-driven leftist echo chamber where agenda and ideologies now far outweigh any kind of actual passion for game development. And that according to this leaker, who worked with Matt Hansen, also said, I know how spiteful of a person Matt unfortunately is, and I know he and probably others will try to witch hunt me just to try and make my life hell because they aren't getting their way. Smash also says at one point in his video that this whistleblower claims that Matt Hansen would go as far as to issue company-wide emails attacking and bullying employees into compliance when it comes to gender and pronouns within Obsidian Entertainment. Basically, someone would get misgendered at Obsidian. They complain to HR because that's what these sorts of people always do. And of course, Matt Hansen supports the agenda like a religion and then would try to swing his meat around to get others to comply. According to the leaker, Obsidian's internal politics and ways of doing things changed around 2018 when they were bought out by Microsoft. During that period of time, Microsoft would release an email company-wide that said, insinuating the introduction of optional but in reality mandatory pronouns in email signatures meetings, and other various communications around the office, and while initially framed as optional, it became quickly clear that dissent was not welcome. So Microsoft was pushing for the agenda and such to be supported 100% across the board during this time. A reminder that this lines up time-wise too, since in 2019, co-founder of Obsidian, Chris Avellone, was accused of assault by female employee. Like I said, it wasn't true, and he won the case, but it's very, very weird that this was buyout and change of culture happens, and then a year later, Avellone, who has notoriously butted heads with the upper senior Obsidian management, suddenly gets his name raked through the coals, almost as if to ruin his name on purpose and pull him out of the picture completely. And while yes, Avellone won the case, technically speaking, whatever the plan was worked, because Avellone is no longer at Obsidian. And of course, this would then allow these yes men and women who now control Obsidian to bow to the agenda, due to Microsoft owning them. Hence where we are right now. We should also remember that Activision Blizzard, which Microsoft unfortunately also owns, has publicly stated that they now demand a DEI officer or diversity, equity, and inclusion officer to be involved with every single project created at Activision Blizzard, no matter how big or small it may be. And that this is done from inception to ensure that diversity and such is injected into every single project made company-wide. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is implemented across Microsoft's own studios or just Activision Blizzard, but at this point, based on how things are looking from Microsoft Studios, it would not surprise me if everything had adopted this mantra of thinking already. Smash would further echo what the whistleblower told him. There were only a handful of straight white males. As they put it, I could count them all on one hand. The studio itself was extremely gay and LGBTQ friendly. And ultimately, that is what it all comes down to for these types. It's about erasing every single person from their environment that is one thing to make way for another thing. And I can almost guarantee you those handful of white guys are likely in leadership positions that allowed those policies to come into effect that removed people like them, just so that they could keep their positions. It's like feeding your friends to piranhas, and the raft is slowly getting eaten away until you have nowhere to go. They're sacrificing people to save their own skin to buy them time, knowing that eventually the very people they are trying to appease will eventually devour and swallow them whole as well. And this is what I mean. I said this in my previous video, but what Matt Hansen is doing here at Obsidian is what always happens. Some woke white guy virtue signals for people who won't even remember his name or his face if he died tomorrow. And I don't mean this to attack Hansen or say that he's not important to people. What I'm saying is that these people, they don't care about you, dude. You're pandering to people who genuinely hate you for things that are outside of your control, and then you're bending every joint in your body to appease them. But you know that it will never be enough until you're eventually removed entirely yourself. How can you not see this? And the fact that these types don't rally against these things is wild to me, that they'd rather fold like lawn chairs in the wake of this woke revolution that they got going over there. But I think what we're seeing ultimately is that games are getting far worse, in a Western sense at least, because they're putting people who don't know what they're doing in power. Look at Shadows. Assassin's Creed's own executive producer openly admitted recently that half of the devs on Shadows are developers who have never developed or shipped a game before. Why would you admit to this? Now whenever that game launches, and then if it ends up sucking, people are going to circle back to these comments for proof. And they will go, well, why did Ubisoft let first-timers work on what is arguably their flagship franchise? Why would you let noobs steer the ship of Assassin's Creed of all things? How much you want to bet these noobs on Shadows also in some way they all align socially and politically in certain ways too? I wouldn't be surprised at all. At this point, if Ubisoft were to shut down or Obsidian gets sued into the depths of oblivion, I would not really feel bad either way. These development studios are being ran by literal Marxist woke talking heads that hate themselves and have humiliation kinks. At what point do we stop ourselves to look at what's going on here and say that enough is enough? I mean, so many of these games are failing because they refuse to give us what we want. Then Space Marine 2 just casually announces, oh yeah, we crossed 5 million copies sold in like 2 to 3-ish months time. Which is crazy good for that size of a game, by the way. Stop making things that nobody wants. It's also weird how Obsidian lately has been making stuff that is just Bethesda but lacks any of the flavor like of those games. Outer Worlds and Avowed are just Bethesda games without the lore or brand recognition behind them. They're just chasing past trends for years now. As I said before, I doubt Avowed bombs mostly because it's on Game Pass, but it will be interesting to see what its Steam numbers end up being, because of course those copies of the game will actually be bought and paid for, as opposed to just being played by people who opened a bag of Doritos chips and got like a code for a free month or something. There's no way that Microsoft is making enough money to keep Game Pass afloat, dude. I'm convinced the only reason why that service still exists is because Black Ops 6 is on it right now. If they remove that, they would be cooked. Nobody would care. It doesn't help that Smash says that Obsidian's developers, based on what this whistleblower said, aren't there anymore to create great games for gamers. But instead, they're just there to push agenda from the top down to further promote their ideologies. None of that is okay, but it's becoming the norm going forward. And the fact that this fake positivity is protecting people like Hansen from getting fired because despite their open racism towards white people, they are ultimately a devout worshipper of the woke religion, so naturally they cannot be fired for stating things that 99% of the Western gaming industry agrees with and has adopted over the years. And ultimately, how we got here is simple. The people who were supposed to defend these things and speak up for us chose to instead take the easy way out, and they lied down and they let the rainbow waves engulf them completely. So whether it's David Jaffe over there defending agendas while claiming that YouTubers are why said agenda is dying, or this Matt Hansen of Avowed getting exposed and having potential lawsuits breathing down his neck, it's very clear that the tides are changing, people are waking up, and these cultists can't hide anymore. Go watch Smash's video, by the way, if you want more. I'll link it below in the description. Thank you for watching, subscribe, thanks to my patrons and members, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.